meeting to order. Calling the meeting to order, please. This is a regular study session for the Littleton City Council. We have all council in attendance. Our first item is a P4. Our P4 is a preliminary project plan. That this is our process, a new process that we've brought in that helps us to, now someone who's interested in redevelopment in the community can present their plan or can give their plan to staff who then shares it with council, and we have an opportunity. I think the Planning Commission has also had the same opportunity to give our input, our thoughts. This is not been a filed application, so we are not under any of our quasi-judicial obligations at this point. And I wanted to just also comment that this is an opportunity for the council to comment, and we have another opportunity for the community later. The developer in this instance, I know, has determined a date for community outreach, and we'll be doing some mailing, etc., to involve the community. Opportunity for them to have a public community meeting on the process. All of this still, again, is before it becomes official application. And before we get started on this one, I wanted to just remind council that this is a little bit different in terms of a lot of the development applications or opportunities that come to council are typically conditional upon that they have an offer on the property, which has a condition upon getting a rezone. So the property owner is different than the developer. In this instance, the developer has purchased the property, so the property is not owned by the Unser family anymore. It has been purchased by this developer, Evergreen, and it is a final purchase. They closed, I think, in December. So and I think we also really need to keep in mind that this is there is existing zoning on this property. So you have a property owner who has existing zoning, and they have decided that they would like to do something different than what is currently zoned. That it is better than what is currently zoned, which I think would be everyone's intent. And so, bearing that in mind, that this developer does not have to come in for this. They don't have to go through the process of a rezone if they don't want to. They can do what that property is currently zoned for. And I think this is, I really want to reach out and just say that I think this is exactly the right thing to do, to turn this into, and I hope it does end up at a rezone and come in as a public process, as opposed to we'll just do what we want to do and not listen to the community or the council or the planning board. So this is, they've opened that door, and so I think that is, appreciate that a lot. So we'll go ahead, and Jocelyn, do you want to start us off on this?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor, Council, and to add on to that, I have a brief presentation for you, and I'll go into some of the detail that Debbie just offered. The first thing I wanted to note is that this P4 for the concept called Parkland was presented to the Planning Commission at the June 25th meeting, and as a result of that discussion, the applicant did make some minor edits to the proposal, and so I'll mention those as we go through the presentation. So that. So quickly, yes, as I mentioned, Planning Commission provided some input already, and this is for council this evening to provide informal and non-binding input on this concept, a development concept for the concept called Parkland. Staff presents it. The applicant is in the audience. They don't have to be, but they do not present. We do require all concepts to have a pre-application meeting at first, so we can figure out what, if they were to move forward, what the process would be. So in this case, the pre-application meeting was held on May 14th, and based on that, there is an existing plan development already approved for this property called South Santa Fe Park, and it was approved in 1985. And based on reviewing Evergreen's concept, if they move it forward, it would require an amendment to this existing plan development.
Quick question.
Sure.
Is Is it called Parkland or Parkfield? Not that it really matters, but I saw it referred to both.
I believe the intention is parkland.
Okay. So is Parkfield an initial?
I'm not exactly sure, but I caught some of that, but when I asked, they said parkland is the concept. So, quickly, just to walk through the development review steps. So, all development in Littleton, we do require pre-application meeting, as I indicated. The P4 option is an option for if you're doing a new plan development in Littleton or if you're amending a plan development. After the P4 in this case, because they would be proposing an amendment to the PD, the neighborhood outreach meeting is required. That all has to happen, and then you can submit a formal development application. Then the review of that application takes place. That was it's reviewed about planning requirements, engineering, fire prevention, Denver Water, South Suburban Parks and Rec. All of those are review agencies, and they provide comment on the concept. Typically, that goes probably around 3 review cycles. From there, for this particular one also, a public hearing is held before the Planning Commission. They're a recommending body for an amendment to a PD. And then for council, as the final decision maker, the first reading would be set to schedule the public hearing, and then the public hearing is held before City Council to make a formal decision on amendment to.
Thank you.
So like I said, it's the concept is entitled Parkland. It's located on 33 acres on the southwest corner of Mineral and Santa Fe, and that's the 33 acres of the PD zone, or called South Santa Fe Park Plan Development, which I said was approved in 1985. So here's the existing PD. And the original PD was 130 acres in the 80s, and see the, oops, we got a thing. Anyway, I'm going to just show you. This basically is mineral, so all of this portion has been removed out of this PD. That's where the light rail station is and the 7-Eleven gas station. So the remaining portion of the PD is everything south of that mineral line. It is approximately 110 acres. And the 33 acres that we're referring to tonight are basically here and above. So within the existing PD, there are certain, they call them parcels. So they're different zoned parcels. Again, I'll just stand up. So this is zoned parcel E, D, or B, D, and G is down here, and within each of these, the existing PD lists out certain uses, height, setbacks, and all of those features. So, just to show you, that's that. The original is very hard to read, so staff did go through this and retype it, if you will, to make it more legible, but this list all of the uses and the performance standards for those planning areas I just showed you. So this is a map we've overlaid on an aerial, those planning parcels of the existing PD, and the orange is trying to depict for you here the property of the 33 acres and which zone parcel area that's in. So as I mentioned, it's G, E, D, B, and C. So this zoning table.
Can you go back, Jocelyn, please?
Oh, sure. Yep. Oops. Oh, sorry.
So I see E and G,
Yep.
and so the top right is what? Is B? Is
Top
that what
right
that
is B.
Oh, I see,
Yeah,
yeah, there
that's
it is,
B.
B, C,
Yeah.
yeah, okay,
And then
thank you.
D is above.
Gotcha, thanks.
So.
Your glasses, I can't see anything.
I know it's hard to, but that is just showing you what the existing zoning is, and then you have to refer back to the existing PD. So this zoning table that was in your packet, this is an overview of what's existing today and what the proposal is. So I'll spend a few minutes on this. I know it's hard to see on that screen. Oh, maybe it's easier on the screen than mine. But so here. I did make some changes from Planning Commission, so I just wanted to show those in yellow. So they have 2 planning areas that they're recommending, one called Vineyard and one called Homestead. And they just had slightly changed, they combined, it was vineyard and another category, so that combined is the current acreage. So that's just a slight change on the acreage there. Parking, I put in here that'll be per code because, as you guys know, in our zoning code, you cannot do any deviation from the parking requirements. So whatever the uses are, they're going to have to meet our existing parking requirements. So that's why I just said per code. And then open space, originally they had proposed at Planning Commission 20%. It's been revised since then, and now they're proposing 25%, or that's the concept of 25% open space for the amendment, or so that's basically keeping it the same as it is today. And then a few tweaks to the setbacks in this concept from mineral to make that a 70-foot setback, and then also for the homestead, made a slight change for a setback from the western boundary and the southern boundary from 15 to 20 feet. And then down at the bottom, this is an interesting little nodule in this existing plan development. The existing PD does allow residential multifamily in plan area B and D. So I'll go back to show you where those are. So, whoops, maybe this is better. So B, you can see, is next to Santa Fe, and D is up kind of along Mineral, that sliver up there. Residential is allowed today, multifamily in those planning areas. And how you calculate the density is 7.5 dwelling units per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. So the applicant did an estimate of what they thought the density would be. I'm not exactly sure if that's correct. We would verify all of this, obviously, when they submit a formal application. But at a minimum, it definitely has a density to it today that would be allowed. What they're proposing is 50 dwelling units per acre, and to allow residential in all of the, in the homestead portion of the proposal. I'll show you that. So here, this map right here, just to give you that. So the pink line, that's called their vineyard planning area, and then the blue is called the homestead. So just so you know that.
The entire area we're looking at is 33 acres, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
So about half the size as mineral property, marathon property.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Thank you.
So that's that. If you have any questions on the zoning table, or I'll just keep going. So within their submittal, they also have provided a narrative that has more detail than what they had presented to Planning Commission. And also within that, there's a vision concept book. And so the next few slides are taken from that vision book outlining the concept. So like I said, it's broken into two planning areas. Is the concept vineyard, excuse me, and that primarily here is kind of showing the commercial, and then the homestead being more of the residential is the concept site plan here.
So
Yes. No, please.
So it's essentially down the middle.
That's, yes.
Okay.
Yep, and then we'll get to a future slide, but then it's showing the access, the South Platte Parkway, which is, there's a kind of a inlet for that right now, you know what I mean? So that road would come kind of along this split here. I'll get that in a second. So then they talk a little bit more about the intention, about the design and the detail of the concept. They give us some examples about architectural styles. Excuse me. Landscaping is also called out, and then the sort of the quality of what the intention is around landscaping and human activity. And then this one really shows you the connection, trail connection, access through the site to, the Mary Carter Greenway and some of our regional trails, and to other trails on other parts of Littleton. This shows you some access, the vehicular, and I guess there could be some pedestrian access, but primarily vehicle access. Here's an overall concept site plan of what could potentially be a development, and think the thing that, on the next page, we get to this. So the thing to note here is they did call out specifically this little plaza area in the middle, kind of going up and down. You can see that, those two planting areas kind of split in half by the road. And then there's that sort of central plaza area, which is shown here. And they gave you some more detail about exactly what that concept would be. And then again, here's more of a massing schematic of what could look like. And then this is just quickly how you do floor area ratio. So as you guys know, on a site that has 10,000 square feet of buildable land area, if you have a floor area ratio of 0.4 to 1, that means you would have 4,000 square feet of building floor area, for example. And then the other last thing to mention is about open space, just to remind everyone of,
The building floor area, is that just the footprint, or would that be like a 4,000 square foot building or a 2,000 square foot two-story building?
Yeah, it would be all of the area inside the walls of the structure, one floor, however, you would build that. That's a good question. And then quickly, just a reminder on Littleton's definition of unobstructed open space. So this in our code, we do require plan development commercial, which is what this existing PD is, to have a minimum of 20% of the site to be unobstructed open space, which means an area upon which no structures may be erected or surface area utilized for storage or vehicular movement. It's not the open space in the sense of like an open space zone, which is typically reserved for more passive park uses.
So
just to clarify.
Not parking lot, but a sidewalk. Would the sidewalk count as open space?
Yes, yep, and landscaping and things like that.
And during too, if you have a patio on the second floor, for example, that patio porch or whatever is unobstructed. I thought we did count it. It was something that we did.
I think we changed that, didn't we?
I think
Yeah,
we'll change that.
The ELCO proposal tried to count it.
Peggy, I do agree. In the past, I think there was some version of that, but I believe that has been changed since I've been here. We do not do that. Yes, yep. So that's my brief presentation, and I'm here to happy answer any questions you have or anything else.
Can you, just for point of reference, go back to the map is this the best map that shows the boundaries of the property?
Let's see, no. Probably that one.
This one, okay.
Sorry, that. Okay, sorry.
I wonder if the developer is aware that we have a homestead already in Centennial. That's Homestead Farms and Homestead Farms 2. Centennial isn't very far from here, so that could be confusing to everybody.
Good observation.
If they did it intentionally, knowing that, I know that they can do that, but
Karina?
I have a couple of pages.
why don't we go through a few?
Yeah.
Well, then I have a couple of pages also.
I got a couple of thoughts right now.
Volume one.
I will, I'll talk about a few of the things that I noted here. So one, of course, is something we've all been talking about for a very long time, is traffic. That is the reason why we are aggressively moving forward with the PEL study, because we know that not only this area, but this whole corridor really needs to be assessed of how we manage not only the current traffic we're experiencing, but the overall growth that's happening in the area, even beyond a development that may happen here. So I'm very concerned that we are exasperating already an F. So we graded ourselves an F. So we are we have nowhere else to go but up. And right now, in the absence of truly that more holistic study, I don't think we're ready for this. if we were to, if the applicant decides to move forward with this, I would expect a very comprehensive, thorough traffic study to the level that we would potentially see with the Pell, because it's very, very complex, and we're in a very bad situation already. The other thing that, I have a few, but let me just talk a little bit about maybe, so height. Okay, so let's talk about height. I know that's the other big one. So we go from 50 and 70 feet to 100 feet across the whole parcel is what is being asked. But in their presentation, they actually only speak of one building that is going to be 100 feet. So to rezone all of this and ask for 100 feet across the whole property is just exposing the opportunity for just about anything and everything that would be built there to be 100 feet. And I don't think, I know that's not what we would want, or it's not what I am representing our community as best as I can would want for that property, that there's the ability to be at 100 feet across the whole parcel. The other thing I would ask to consider is there is a lot of new conversations around considering water and flood management in development. I attended a conference about a year ago where, you know, best practices now, especially in areas like this, is to bring in an expert from flood management, and that is one of the elements that's considered in land use decisions. So I would really want to see that extra diligence and creativity that can come out of that to really help protect this area from some of those impacts, and I think it also helps protect the environmental nature of this area. So I'll stop there. I'll come back if somebody doesn't comment on my other ones.
Just a note on that. Urban Drainage and Flood Control District, I'm assuming they're part of the folks that we have checked this out. Okay.
Absolutely.
So,
This is different than checking to make sure. It really is an integral part of the land use planning, which creates a lot more creativity and different options that can be presented. So you may be able to speak to that if you've had any experience with that. And I have a resource I can make available.
Yes, and I know Urban Drainage, they would be a formal reviewer. They also have reached out to the city, and they are willing to meet with applicants if we have, or people have that interest, to talk about those options. An example is that Westerly Creek in Denver, redevelopment up there, and that turned out really well. So yeah, absolutely. Good point.
Carol.
I would emphasize the points about height and about traffic. Those are the number one concerns too. I'm puzzled why the applicant would ask for everything for all of it on the usage chart. It seems that they checked just about everything, including car lots and farms, and that seems to me that they aren't really focusing on what they're going to do, but want to be able to do anything. And that would leave us hanging out there with having approved they're doing anything. A 100-foot building is 9 or 10 stories. And if I remember right, they're proposing to do that along the river. And when I picture using the river, the last thing I want to see, almost the last, is a 9 or 10-story wall of building. And it also obstructs seeing the river from the rest of the development. And that is a substantial height. It does, I don't know that, well, we certainly don't have yet a justification why that would be necessary. I see in the proposal a statement that increased density is required to support the TOD location. But I didn't really see any justification about why that's required. That's the So I'm curious about that. Littleton Village, different development, is in my district, and I hear about that at least weekly, about how disappointed the residents are there with the fact that the restaurants and entertainment that were promised are not there. And those same things are written about in the write-up here about how wonderful it's going to be. So it talks about restaurants and entertainment. Before I went ahead with that being a criteria for going ahead with all of this, I would want to see signed contracts this time around, because we had those promises. People bought houses apparently based on those promises. And now the city is dealing with their dissatisfaction. Whoever made the promises is probably long gone. So more concreteness. And then another overriding concern is we have this glorious gem of a river, just a wonderful piece of property there that so many people value. And I think all of us heard from many, many citizens this week about their concerns about going ahead with this, and a lot of it centered around the river. With the nature and recreation, views, all kinds of reasons for it. This concept it seems to ignore the fact that there's a river there. And that seems like a terrible waste of a resource that there was a time when a river was disregarded as it's just the river. Pretend it's not there, but those days are gone. People value rivers, and we should also. And so I'll stop there.
Jerry?
Cool. A couple things regarding the traffic study. What I'm really going to be interested in knowing is the access to Mineral, the access to Santa Fe. I really would prefer to see any traffic going to Santa Fe versus Mineral. And the reason I say that is because most of the problems there that we have there are folks that don't even live in Littleton, so I don't have a problem adding problems to those folks. But as far as Mineral goes, that is put it on record, baby. Jerry Valdez with an S. Yeah. But Mineral is really, for the most part, is Littleton folks. So I don't want to see us dumping more traffic onto Mineral. That's going to end up heading east on Mineral, perhaps. So I would like to see some, creative idea of how our developers can avoid using Mineral as much as possible. I know it's not going to be completely, but as much as possible. The other part, and Carol, you had mentioned it too, on the commercial part, at Platte Canyon and Mineral, when that development went in there, it's apartment buildings as well as commercial, didn't we put in a requirement that commercial had to go in first and a certain percentage of it had to be up and operating before we could do residential? So I think that would be similar to what Carol was just saying there, that kind of plan. And again, as you guys know, that Inglewood is building along Santa Fe, Highlands Ranch building along Santa Fe, Sterling's Ranch is happening. So all that traffic on Santa Fe is going to be pretty crazy. I really want to try to preserve Mineral as much as possible. That's it. Thank you.
So to me, it looks like the developer is proposing to basically flip-flop where the residential can go. Right now it can go in B, which is up in the corner of Mineral and Santa Fe, versus closer to the river. And actually reducing the total amount. I think was it roughly 100 units per acre, at about 13 acres, about 1,300 residential units could go up right now without a rezone. Is that
Yes,
roughly?
we haven't verified that actual calculation, but that's absolutely correct, that on the Santa Fe side today, residential, multifamily could go on.
Okay, and so I think right now it would be just under 1,000, so it's a little less. What without a rezone, what sort of things could go up there right now? What could we see besides having residential on B? Then there's there would be more commercial along closer to the river. Would that probably be how it would end up having to be?
Right, you mean what are on B? Well, there's a lot of uses that are allowed in that zoning table, but on B, a variety of commercial and residential uses are allowed today, yes.
Okay.
I can read some of them. them, I suppose. Clothing store, drugstore, grocery store, restaurants, transit, variety stores, automobile service, gas stations, bars and lounges, a beauty shop, residential, those type of things.
So, I mean, I appreciate the attempt to flip-flop. I think if there's going to be development there, residential should be closer to the river. And I think the closest this parcel actually gets to the river is about 250 meters. So it's not right up against the river. It's not going to be a big wall of buildings right there. It is set back ways, but it is a big change from having nothing there. And I mean, I think that's important to realize moving forward that it's, it's not going to be nothing forever. As much as we all would love it to be open space, and I would love to have someone purchase it and donate to the city and we can manage it as open space, but I don't think that's going to be the cards. I think that that's a good effort to put the residential towards the river and the commercial away from the river. I like the architectural design that they laid out there. I really like what the buildings look like, the materials. They have this agrarian kind of feel to it, but I wish there was more agriculture, something there's some kind of community garden or some sort of green space there that was more than just a little walkway in between. And I really like the idea of it being mixed use, but I don't see this as mixed use. It looks very segmented to me. It's, when I think of mixed use, you combine the uses together rather than, it is completely residential on one side and commercial on the other. And I think I would like to see some more mixing of that, of those uses. And as far as the residential portion of it, there's really only two residential uses there. You got apartments and assisted living, and I don't necessarily see, there's no more options for more people. You got apartments, there are 5 apartment buildings there, yep. And then a big assisted living home, and it's not, it's not necessarily very creative or innovative. This looks like it's designed for the last 10 years, rather than designed for the next 20 years. I want to see something a little more creative and innovative and more thought put into it. This doesn't seem like there was a lot of thought. It's like, let's look around and see what else has worked and hasn't worked and just kind of recreate that.
Can you tell me how many units are in the care facility? I dug and I just couldn't
In that
find that
concept?
out. In the concept,
So it's
of
a
course,
concept,
of
right?
what
Yeah,
is
yeah.
protected. Everything else is saying, 51 units, so I'm coming up with 306 units of apartments. And also the garage, is that a 1-story, 2-story garage? What is the dimension of that garage?
No, I don't know. This
Is
is
it
just
just
a
a covered
preliminary
garage?
concept. I think the idea there is to show you that there would be probably a 1-story garage is what it looks like, is my guess.
Yeah.
And then it just mentions that it's a 4-story congregate
Right.
care facility. It doesn't mention the number of beds.
Yeah, so I'm like the rest of the council here is, you're dumping, 306 units, 2 cars or 2 people per unit. That's, additional, 600 plus people potentially that could be coming out on the Santa Fe and or out to Mineral on an intersection that we all agree needs a lot of work. And that's without the care facility. The ped crossing, I just, pedestrian crossing there, to get over to the train station. I assume that's just going to be crosswalk at across Mineral there by 7-Eleven or whatever's. I guess that's where it would be right there. I assume that's what it is, or maybe it's a tunnel. I doubt we're going underneath Santa or going underneath Mineral on that, so that'd be a concern. Again, I think a lot of people will use the light rail station, and I think that's a real positive. Again, I'm with Kyle on the river. I'm a big believer in that river, but I think it's far enough away with a lot of trees. I don't think there's going to be any sights, any views of the river from any of the buildings. So it's not going to be up against the river to where it's going to really deter from it. So I'm okay with that as much as I don't want to see anything going close to that river. I too enjoyed that. And then, yeah, for me, I really just know how big that care facility is going to be and how many additional people or how many additional units that's going to be. So I think that's it for now.
Yeah, I've got several things. So some are written and some are on my
Okay, go
notes.
through two. We've got-
Go.
Keep going around.
So, first I'm wondering if people who commute from that light rail station have been surveyed to see where they're coming from and whether they want to move from wherever they're coming from. My husband and I sometimes go from that light rail station. It's 2 miles from us, but we love the walking. More often we take the downtown station. But to know who's wishing they live closer, as opposed to assuming people want to move closer, seems a weak place to start. That's one. And it did bother me a bit, the illustrations didn't seem to be tied to a guaranteed outcome in terms of the value and so forth. And I won't go into detail, but perhaps kind of look at that. Because we've seen some very, very attractive drawings of things. And then we got, in one instance, I want to say what looks like 10 when we thought we were going to get something really, really nice. So knowing what really is going to materialize, I think, is important. People run out of money, they can't, sort of like the project Carol mentioned, people run out of money, they can't afford to do what they thought they were going to do, and then we get something that doesn't really help us, the way I see it. Let's see. I'm flipping through, reading the notes quickly. And again, the walking space. There are spaces for people to park here and there, but part of the problem is people coming from elsewhere, and as I said, they don't necessarily want to move here. They just want to use our light rail stations. So it's
They aren't our light rail stations anyway.
pardon?
They're not our light rail stations.
No, so,
RTD's light rail stations.
well, when I say our, I mean the ones located
Okay.
here. That's what I mean. Yes, they're not ours.
Should say generally.
I'm a little realistic. Back on.
We talk about a needs analysis on page 6, but at this point, a really good needs analysis, as Carol said, should already have been done. So I'm really asterisking or exclamation pointing what Carol said. And Jerry, I think, has already mentioned, we already have major traffic coming in 2 directions, from the south and from the west, and now we want to create a bigger traffic jam. People can walk already, and I think I said this, but since I'm slipping through, people can walk to Aspen Grove and other places, and some people, including me, do walk there, whether it's a mile or 2 miles. So it's, at least recognize what the reality is, even if we want to add more of that reality. Height of things is a concern to me. It's kind of a low profile, at least a relatively low profile. The density parts of the city can do different things, but the South Platte area is a crown jewel of Littleton in many respects. Same kind of thing.
You're killing our ratings here, Peggy.
And then I think it relates, Jerry, to what you said, but if we're having major changes to that intersection with loops going this way and that way, how in the world does that affect the whole concept of the view one way, another, and the integration of this into what we love about Littleton? And that might be the last, yeah, thank you.
Corinne?
Does it look like I have any comments?
Yes,
We'll go around once more.
We're gonna
I want
stop.
to quickly echo a comment, Kyle, that you said, that this looks like something from 10 years ago, like literally took the words out of my mouth. I just said them to myself a few minutes ago. And I actually, when I look at this particular area, it is not too unlike Aspen Grove. I mean, it's very similar in that it has the commercial in the front, it has the apartments in the back. So again, it just feels like something that has been done as opposed to looking forward and being creative and being thoughtful of, what can it look like? What do these environments look like 10 years from now that we haven't even been thinking about? So I really asked for this to be a lot more thoughtful, a lot more creative. We had some sparks of ideas that when we were going through the this area, the initial planning before we landed obviously in a framework. For many reasons that plan was not adopted, but there were some things in there that were very interesting and creative and not thought about before. For example, the city ditch that's referenced here, there was an idea of how do you actually, make this alive, create, call it a very small river walk, maybe more of a creek walk. And while I did read in the material that the city of Englewood, I believe, said that this needs to be covered, the city ditch is uncovered in other areas. So just, I'd like this to be work like we haven't worked before, be a lot more thoughtful, bring in partners, push the envelope, let's challenge ourselves, and let's find ways to do what is possible here for what it can be for the community, because this is an amazing, amazing location. And I want to see amazing work here done. But yes, that's going to be hard and different than how we've done things before.
Harold, anymore?
I would like to remind all of us that this is about land use. It's not about the pictures of what might happen. So we have pictures of 4-story buildings. We don't have any pictures of 9- and 10-story buildings, yet the proposal is for us to approve that for the whole area. So I just want to caution that, kind of like Peggy was, that what we see here, if we approve the proposed changes, may very well not be what we get.
Jerry, anything else?
Regarding that issue, I mean, I've sat through a lot of flyover views and things on what was going to happen, and half the time it isn't that. So, yeah, that's all.
Kyle, anything else?
Sure, just building off the height right there. To go into something Karina said, is it possible to maintain the height restrictions or leave, not what was there, but the height restrictions according to the B, C, D, E, and G? Or is it getting rid of those parcels, and really having the 2 parcels?
Well, I think that's the point or purpose of the P4 on some level, right? To get comment about what you like and don't like, so then the applicant, you know what I mean? If they decide to move forward, they can figure out or take your comment and see if they want to make a tweak to what they have.
It would be possible to say, okay, we're going to, for this, we would keep 50-foot height for, let's call it D, E, and G, and then potentially 70-foot height for B and C, kind of move those around a little bit there.
Oh, certainly. So
Okay.
you're saying could they change the height in the, yes.
Okay, that's what I was, just to have a height restricted in certain areas and different heights in different areas.
Correct.
Okay.
yeah. So they could propose, if they're making an amendment, they could propose
Okay.
different heights in
Okay,
different
because
areas.
I mean, I would be more amenable to that. If it's gonna be a uniform height across the whole area, I mean, I could see 70 foot, that's the maximum, that's there for half of it right now. That makes a little more sense, but I think if it's the idea to have one taller building, you know, if they're saying 5, 6 stories, make it, you know, write it down and say that's where it's gonna be, everything else is gonna be under 50 feet or whatever that may be. There was, what other thing was to say? Oh, remember what Pat said about the crosswalk over there. They mentioned possible future public funds for a bridge over, which is all fine and nice, but you know, if they're thinking about this, you know, and they're wanting some concessions from the city to say change things, you know, would maybe saying, hey, we will pitch in to contribute towards this, to do something like that. I think that would be something to consider to, you know, kind of give and take there. And then I think one last thing was, I think I heard it during the planning commission, when you look at that, the map of the proposal there, there's a heck of a lot of concrete. I mean, it's one big parking lot, and it doesn't, you know, just the map, whatever you want to call it, right there, one of those, either. It just, that's the first thing that pops out at me is how much blacktop is there, how much white is there. And, you know, you see the little public gathering area in the middle, but there's no park. Yes, it's right against the Platte River Park, but that's a different kind of park than you think. You have a playground. You're going to have, you know, up to 900 dwelling units. Okay, half of them are assisted living. They're probably not going to go down slides and on swings, but there's going to be lots of kids in there, and there doesn't really seem to be a whole lot of opportunity there. So I think if you're going to look at having several hundred residential units, have consideration for the families that are going to be there. Have a park, have space to plant, have a garden, have a little park. I also liked in the land use chart of opportunities there was, I think, service buildings like schools and city buildings, things like that. I don't know if there's any need for anything, but that might be something to partner with the school district and the city. Say, hey, do you have any need for some more use, and we can try to plan that in there. Just to kind of be more outside of the box thinking rather than just saying residential one side, commercial the other. That's not, as I said before, not too creative.
Pat, anything else?
Has there been any conversation on the property to the south of that, of this property?
The remaining 77
Right.
plus acres.
I mean, I'm looking at the south Platte River Parkway, and that's where that's going to obviously go into at some point, and eventually, you know, I would think would again dump out onto Santa Fe somewhere along the way. But right now, it looks like it's just getting dead end right there until something happens
That's
to that
correct.
property.
Yes, we
Okay.
don't have any other active.
Who owns that property then? Is that
Remainder
they still own
of
it?
the family.
Okay. No, I think I'm good.
Peggy, anything else?
Yeah. So on the park issue, which I think is a good one, there needs to be some kind of place where people can play. And what comes to my mind is Farmers Park in the northeast neighborhood, where they can have some fairly good-sized games out there. Now, this is a different kind of thing, not this located along a green area and so forth, but a really nice area for people to play. Hopefully they don't get into fights, just play, right? Nice size football. You know, touch football. Maybe some basketball hoops for just a little informal practice, whatever. I may go out there myself. So.
Pickup game, a pickup game.
Yeah, I've got a pretty good hook shot, so. Anyway, so it just looks like a little city park there.
Okay, is that it? Okay. I just have a few pages. So there's a number of things that I have some concerns with, but there's also some things that I appreciate. And I think that the developer recognizes that this is an important access, particularly because of the light rail and also because of the access of Santa Fe and Mineral. So it provides a nice environment, a good sale for resident, or for commercial restaurants and stuff like that. That is a part of what we hate about it, is being such a busy intersection, but part of what attracts this type of business is that it's a busy intersection. I really am not certain that I am in love with the split. I think that it would be a lot more dynamic community if there was residential mixed in with the retail. If you're going to go 4 stories, put a couple stories of apartments above the retail, make that more interesting over there. I think that there is an opportunity that was missed in terms of proximity to the light rail. I know it was zoned with a lot of residential up against Santa Fe, and no, that would not be my preference, although I did not live far off of Santa Fe in residential for 14 years and managed to live through it. And it was not, it can be noisy, but they also make buildings now that you don't have that kind of noise. It is not for everyone. It is for a certain demographic, and housing types serve different demographics, and I think that this is an opportunity for that. The other thing I do like, one of the comments that you guys, that the developer has, is that reducing the setbacks inside the development. I think that's smart. I think that when you're creating these types of things, the larger setbacks within the development, the more separated things become. If you really want to create an active, engaging place, reducing those is, I think, a smart thing to do. I don't favor reducing them anywhere else on there. I also have a really big issue with the trailhead, with the access down to the river. I appreciate all of his comments regarding the river and wanting to build, and it's obviously one of the reasons why you want to put something there. Certainly the people are going to want to live in that area. Who doesn't want to live up against an open space? But I have a real problem, yes, that map. And what's that? Is that on your
Presentation.
P4 narrative for council?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
part
part of the concept plans. There's just one called concept plans, and it's, I think,
Okay,
the
gotcha.
first page of that attachment.
And so I have a concern with the most north arrow. And what that is showing is that there would essentially, that little trail there is that would trail over. And I have talked to the developer about this, and I have also talked to South Suburban about this. And there is not a trailhead in that area. There is not a trail in that area. There is a little social trail that runs along there. And to get under Mineral, that is a dirt path. And to think about paving that and creating some sort of different access, I have a real issue with that. I have concerns about creating a trailhead for this neighborhood. We don't do that. We have trailheads. There's one right across Mineral. I think there needs to be a better work around how are people able to access the river corridor. Of course they should. It's there for the public enjoyment. But I believe that we have to protect that area, the open space, the banks, the river, by not having people cutting through and jumping. That area is not intended for that. There's you can see the little path. That is the public That is the public walk. We don't want the public to get off of that walk either because of the nature and the wildlife. And that's something that we've worked really, really hard to preserve. So I think that's really important. That leads me to that I really like the idea of a pedestrian bridge that takes people from this neighborhood, from this retail, across Mineral. It reduces a whole lot of safety problems, and then it eliminates the problem of people wanting to slip in the river that way because they don't want to try to walk across Mineral with their kids and strollers and dogs and bikes. And I don't blame them, and I wouldn't either. And I think if we're going to create a community where we want people to do that, then we need to make it easier for them to be able to enjoy it. And I also think that the parking it's just, I don't like all that parking. I don't understand why developers continue to push back so hard about parking garages. I've seen parking garages done that you don't even know it's a parking garage. I've seen them being able to use part of it for retail and commercial so that it does a double benefit. Go down Pearl Street and look at what Sushi Den did with their parking garage. Brilliant. It's exactly what it should. I'm not saying that's what Littleton needs to do, but that's creative thinking. And I think get some of that cement up off of there and let people park in garages. I think that there's opportunity there with some of the traffic and stuff like that too. I don't get the 100-foot thing. You're not indicating that there's any need for 100-foot. I think that the idea was maybe that business office, the commercial office that's 4-foot, that it could possibly add a couple more feet. I think the 100-foot may be a real deal breaker on a lot of things, so I think you need to go, I would like to see a lot more consideration about how you could be more thoughtful about why 100, why the foot, why the height. I don't have a problem with vertical mixed use. I think the vertical mixed use, as long as it doesn't get too high, is in many ways a better answer than the horizontal mixed use. It's a better use of the land. But it has to be done the right way and it has to be smart and creative. I think that the developers should really be thinking about the possibility of creating a district over here, a special district to help pay for maybe some of these, maybe pay for a parking garage, charge for parking. People are used to paying a couple bucks at a number of places now where they hadn't charged. And then have the folks that are shopping and playing and enjoying pay for some of the improvements, pay for the walkable, the bridge going over. I have a real problem with the usage chart too. I think we've got to go through that. There's a lot of usages that, and we're dealing right now with an unintended consequence of a pretty liberal usage chart in South Park. And so I don't want those types of things to happen, and I think that there can be some more thought there. Whatever the traffic study shows, and I don't even know if this is possible, but I think it would be interesting to understand if in fact this could actually alleviate some traffic there. And by that I mean people that would come through there to maybe just stop for dinner and not be in the rush hour, or to go through there. There is a ride out onto Santa Fe. And you could go through there and I don't know. It may not even be reasonable.
I think you would hate for that to be a cut through, with
Well,
people
and
trying
I think they've got it designed so it wouldn't be a cut
Right.
through, but I think that would be something that would have to be thought about, because that would not be what you want. And then I also want to make sure that whatever you're doing in there, that there is a huge consideration for the bike and ped. I mean, that bigger sidewalks, nicer cuts, places where people can bike safely and cars could drive safely. I agree. I'd love to see it be more creative, more thoughtful, unique. I think that the developer, I think that the thing can math out, as they like to say, creativity, uniqueness, and just doing something that's a little bit special. That doesn't always take a lot of money. It takes some time and it takes some thought. And I hope that as they walk through this process with the community, that the community will give some real thoughtful input as to what are some of those things that would help make it that way. Because I'm not sure that that's something that developers who don't live here, live, play, and work here really understand completely. Not their bad, just a reality. I think that's about what I've got. I think my big things are that we've got to work on that river access. I really want to see a lot more thought on what we can do in terms of some more creative parking and a bridge. And then I'd like to see some height variations. I don't think everything needs to be 4 feet. And I think that might be, and I know there's a consideration based on the neighborhoods that are on the other side of Santa Fe in terms of view corridor and view loss. And I want to respect that. But I think a 2, 3, 4-story mix could be a lot more interesting looking, and it still doesn't take I don't know what that 100-foot is, but that's a scary number, and I think that needs to be really thought out. There was one other thing. Oh, in terms of the view of the river, there is not a view of the river. There's you don't get a lot of view of the river in Littleton because the river is down. The river is sunk down. But you do get a beautiful view of the trees and the open space that's back there. And that large space that we have spent years acquiring as a buffer for development is going to earn its keep. And that's what I want to make sure that we're very, very considerate, that was never put there to be access point for the development. That was put there to protect the river. And then that's a big priority, because that is a very, very, they call it more of a critical area of the river, because it is not as aggressively used as the Mary Carter side, which is the other side. And so it's intentionally not been created as a dual trail because of that. And so that's going to be a huge consideration for me going forward. Council, I'll let a couple more go.
Yeah, just so piggyback on one issue you raised about that trail on the north side there. So there will be people who want to walk and bike year-round. And so, like, the trail gets plowed when there's snow on it, the Greenway Trail gets plowed. There will be people out there wanting to walk and jog as soon as, even before it gets plowed. And bike, the whole kit and caboodle. So I think we have to encourage access to the river in ways that, on not just willy-nilly access, but plan for that access, because it's going to be happening. If we don't do it right, it'll happen bad. So.
Okay, anything else, anyone?
I'll just touch on connectivity. You touched on this, and I think that's the piece that's missing here as well, is there's, it feels like there's not enough good and desirable and pleasant connectivity even within the property as well as going outside of the property. So again, walking across a parking lot is not enjoyable, it's not safe. So I think connectivity is, again, lots of room for improvement there, both within the area and then, outside the property.
Great. Okay, one more.
I think this is a great place to start the discussion from what was going to go there, what we like, what we don't like, rather than just flat out saying, no, let's see, hey, this is what will work for us, this is what makes sense for the community. So I think it's a good start for a discussion.
I agree, and I think one of the things that we can't do, because the property to the south is, we don't know what will happen there, but one thing to keep in mind about that property is Jocelyn, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's really heavily zoned for single family. It's got a large single family over there. And so part of what, it's unfortunate that one's going to be done and then we don't know when the other half is, but to keep in mind that something will go over there. And is what goes here on this side going to be compatible? Is it going to look like two totally different things, or making sure that there's at least some compatibility, and we don't even know, but I think that there could be some thought now on this regarding that. So, all right, we're at time on this. Thank you very much. Appreciate.
Thank you very much.
And we'll go do a couple-minute break, so those that want to leave may leave. before we start our next one, which is on sewer. Who doesn't want to hear about this? Who wants to leave? in conversations with the city manager, part of this council is somewhat in preparation for our joint meeting with Inglewood at the plant in a couple weeks.
Next week?
19th? Yeah,
19th.
July 19th.
So part of that is in preparation, part of this is in preparation for that. So kind of keep that in mind, and if there's some additional information you guys want and have some additional questions, these guys can put those answers back together for us before we have that meeting there, so.
Exactly. Thank you, Mayor.
So, I'll jump in, I guess.
Yeah, go.
Last year, I visited with council, and Tiffany did, to talk about, kind of where we are with a couple of the utilities that we own, which are the sewer utility and the stormwater utility. And so tonight is sort of an update on that. Part of it is also to prep you all for the meeting on the 19th, since I know that you don't labor in detail over the sewer system day in and day out like our staff does.
How do you know?
Well, you might. Hey, if you do, let me know, because I can put you to work. So that's what we're going to do tonight, is touch on that. We're going to kind of cover a number of things from the financial side, what we're doing, how we fit in with Englewood right now. I've got a little update on the biogas project, because I know that the staff's going to be talking about that. Really, I'm just going to give you just kind of a snapshot update. But the staff will be covering that at the treatment plant at the general meeting with both councils here coming up in a couple of weeks. As a side note, I spent yesterday locked in a room with the city manager from Englewood and the attorney that represents the plant, David Woodward, and we were interviewing candidates for the new director of the plant down there, and we had a really successful day, and we're hopeful to have that resolved here pretty quickly, I believe. So I'm very excited about that. So I'd spent all day yesterday talking about sewers as well. So very exciting, very exciting.
Big week for you.
Yeah, well, I talked about them this afternoon with the Rotary Club as well. So it's a giant sewer infrastructure week. It's just awesome, So what I want to do is we're just going to kind of do a broad overview and dig down into a few areas. This particular slide is one that we created this year, because one of the things that we've worked on as we moved into how we want to approach the financial side of the sewer utility going forward is that historically the bills that people receive don't break out collections and treatment. And that's a place that we need to go to. Currently our financial bucket doesn't do that either. And we feel that it's important that our customers understand the difference between collections and treatment, and then also stormwater, since it's charged on there. So we put together this little graphic which kind of breaks out what's collections, what's treatment, what is stormwater, and those kind of things, just as an explanation. So we'll continue to use this along the way, and basically, the top shows where it comes from. It goes to the treatment plant, gets treated, and enters the South Platte again. And then the stormwater collects through our stormwater system, goes through water quality controls before that enters the river as well. And that's really, and the other thing, I actually said this earlier today in a presentation, is one of the things why it's important, you actually want everyone upstream of you to invest as much in their sewer utility as we do. Because unless you live on a mountaintop, everyone is downstream. So you always need to remember that, and that's why it's important for not only us but others to invest in their sewer utilities.
Even the people on the mountaintop, it's downstream on them.
It is. It's kind of downhill to them, at least.
Yeah, from someplace higher.
That's right. So that's the way we kind of think about this thing. So, just break that out. Collections are the system that gathers it and conveys it. That includes interceptors, pump stations, lift stations, all those kind of things, as well as the force mains and that kind of stuff. And the treatment plant, of course, is where we address that. This year, going into this year, into 18, our sewer utility budget, our revenues were just over $19 million. Our expenditures were about 13.3, and then you can see where the expenditures broke out with about 1.2 in collections and about 12.5 in treatment as well. As part of the slide program I put together, I estimated the value of the sewer system that's in the ground at about $325 million, and I estimated the value of the plant at total reconstruction at over $400. So these two assets alone, you're looking at close to $750,000 in investment that's built already by the people that came in front of us. So that's why it's pretty important for us to do that. I wouldn't want to replace that anytime soon. So on the sanitary side, we've got about 128 miles of sanitary pipe, and that goes from about this big to about this big. Didn't mean to get you there, Tiffany. 66 inches. I wish my wingspan was longer, but that's related to how tall I am, I think. So we also have 9 sanitation districts which come into our system that we service at the treatment plant. So if you think about our district customers, the total area customer base that's served by the plant itself is about 250,000 people. And our plant is the 3rd largest plant in the state of Colorado, behind the 2 metro wastewater plants. And there's just kind of a quick thing there. This is actually not in the materials I sent out. I added this today, but it kind of gives you a breakdown of where the districts are around us, kind of where we sit in there. There's a lot of small districts, bigger districts, some developed out of residential development or those kind of things. So a number of the smaller ones are actually managed by a larger district. Like Platte Canyon manages a number of the smaller districts as well. So they really represent probably 6 or 7 districts as well. So
Just to add that all the residents of Littleton do not just belong to one district. They are kind of, you can have a different district even if you're part of the city.
yeah, the boundaries of the district do not align with the city boundaries. We actually have some places where Jocelyn and I went through this in the last year where we had a spot where there was a commercial plaza and half of it was in our district and half of it was in another district. And so one of the things that we're working on with Platte Canyon and some of the other smaller districts is to do kind of boundary smoothing so that we have less of some of those jagged edges. It's easier for customers to understand coming and going and those kind of things. So those are just the little things that you do over time. And that's become a lot easier with GIS systems and those kind of things, which really give us a little bit better definition on the ground of sort of what things are. I put in there, this is, yes, ma'am.
Explain that. So if you're smoothing the boundary, I mean, you're just not, you can't just say, okay, I'll take that. I mean, you got to change,
Yeah.
you repipe?
No. Actually, generally speaking, the pipes are, at that point, are probably coming together because they're all going into the same system downstream to us. So a lot of times it was just how it developed. Maybe there was a parcel that developed by itself sometime in the past, and then the urban kind of area crept up to it. And so what we're doing with the boundary smoothing is really we're just working with them to say, let's say you and I were adjoining properties and you were kind of a little fish hook or something. We would work to add you into our district so the boundary went this way, and then we just kind of swap out billing. It doesn't change, where things go when they flush the toilet. It just kind of, it goes into the same pipe and downstream, and it just makes billing and clarity a little bit easier for everybody involved. As well as it helps our operational people. It's a lot like the police run into where, who's writing a ticket for an accident with a state trooper or a sheriff, or, unless you have joint agreements there, the same thing happens. So very similarly. So what I did, we are actually updating this memo, and this is 3 pages of sewer history. So back in 1962, you would have paid $13 a year for your sewer service here in Littleton. Today, that number for in-city is $258. Out-of-city is actually $235, and then you can see the 2 columns on the right are inside city and outside city tap fees. So you come in, you got to tap into the sewer system, you have to pay a fee for that. In addition to the construction and all those things, it's just a fee to access the system. There was a question today about how does that compare. So we don't have an extensive detailed study, but I did pull out some data from a 2015 study that was done by Senior Special District Association. And so this data is 3 years old, and it's aggregated, and it doesn't cover, it covers probably, I'm guessing, about 1/3 of the state based on the response rate. And so our annual bill for inside the city is $258 for a customer. The average bill for sewer service in Colorado is $453, so we are 57% of the average. And the out of district, we are 235, and the average is 527, so we're 45% of the average. The tap fees on the other side, we're kind of right at the mean. The mean statewide is about $5,600 to $5,800 for both in and out of district, in and out of city. But those fees range from $265 for a tap fee to $16,500. So there's a little bit of a variability in that particular bucket. So one of the things that, as you'll see later, we're going to talk about rates and rate study. And so this is one of those things that as we go through a rate study product in the future, all those benchmark comparisons would be included in that kind of research and that kind of approach to doing things.
And the tap fee applies only for new development?
Yeah, pretty much. Most properties, like even if you went and tore a structure down and put a new structure on it, there's already a tap paid for on that property. It would be if you're adding another tap, or let's say you're going from residential to commercial, then you would have to pay a tap fee.
Like capacity of sorts.
Yeah, you'd be upsizing your capacity.
And that looks like it hasn't changed.
No,
At least on page 3, what was page
yeah, it looks like, yeah, it's been pretty consistent.
2008.
Yeah, since 2008 was our last update, and that was a doubling of fees in 2008, and it looked like a doubling of fees the year before in 2006 and then 7, historically. So.
That was about the time of our last rate study.
Say again?
That was about the time of the last rate study.
So, as I touched on last year, we have some new folks in here that weren't part of that, but one of the things that we're focusing on in the utilities, and you've heard about this with our other infrastructure assets, is long-term planning that will create sound financial forecasting, maintenance planning, and capital planning. In order to do that, we need to have quality data and information to make those decisions. Things like stormwater and sewer are a little bit hard to do because they're in the ground. And so it's a little bit different than going out and do a pavement drive-by and doing a windshield survey. You can even do that with pavement. So what we're really targeting is evaluating the current system condition and rating it, really completely understanding what our asset portfolio is, what the maintenance demands are, what the labor that takes place to support those maintenance demands, and then build out a long-term infrastructure repair and replacement program. The other thing that we'll do as part of that is do some risk profiling. An example of that would be, let's say you've got 2 pieces of pipe and they're in equal condition of deterioration. But one pipe services 1,000 homes and 12 businesses that employ 2,000 people, and the other one services 60 homes. Your risk profile is very different for those 2 particular pipes. The people in the 12 homes may not feel that way, but in the bigger scheme of things, so that's part of the approach to building out what our capital planning is going to be and those kind of things. So how do we get there? Some of the things that are also affecting us, we have aging equipment, we have aging staff, actually is a big part of that as well. Art's been with us for 38 years, I believe, at this point in time. And there's part of the reason of the asset is we really need to get what's in Art's brain out into some usable format for the rest of us. So we don't have to do some like Vulcan mind meld or something out there to do that. And the other thing is part of this process is for us to be able to establish levels of service clearly and defined throughout our system for all of our infrastructure, and especially this one. I did touch on there that our wages are not competitive in the marketplace, especially in this particular sector. All of our people, even if they're just going out there and sticking a hose in the ground to suck sewer pipes, have to have a wastewater certification. And we've historically hired seasonal people to do that. And the current construction market unemployment rate here in Colorado is about 1.7%. And so there's not a lot of those folks wandering around looking for seasonal work. So we need to we're working with human resources to understand what that part of the marketplace looks like, how we're going to deal with that, how we're going to build in crews and succession planning going forward. So that's a target for us as well. Currently, we are not even close to meeting industry standards or CIRSA's recommendation, our insurance company, related to maintenance frequency and checking. Simply put, we're in a very reactive position. We have camera equipment, but the only camera work we've basically done in the last 5 years is in response to complaints or problems.
That was one of those complaints. It came out.
Peggy called me about one of those complaints as well, so it happens. It's part of the business, and I'm actually going to show you some pictures here in a second, which you can understand why that happens. So, obviously these are the best. At the end of the day, our goal is to provide the best service of the highest quality for the most effective cost profile that we can do it, and to maintain it over time in a cost-effective manner. And so the good part is, yes, we do that, but then that also allows us to create a rate structure that's supportive of that, is smoothed over time, so you don't go 15%, 2%, 17%, 2%, and those kind of things. So it's predictable for our customers, for our connector districts, for all of those kind of things from a decision-making perspective. The other part of it is there's some other things that people don't think of. Safety and security is a big part of it today. There are people that would choose to take out your infrastructure systems, and this helps us deal with that as well. It also gives us an opportunity to really drive down costs, be more efficient, find cost-sharing opportunities with other partners in other districts that will really help us be more effective as well. So, asset management, conceptually speaking, the picture in the bottom center is all of the things that you have in your infrastructure, from pipes in the ground to the markings that are on the street in a crosswalk. Like a city our size, let's take signs and signals. A city our size will probably have 25 to 30,000 signs and markings out there. And, all of these assets, we got a catalog, condition, and then it also adds to efficiency. For example, if we have to deal with an issue, whether it's a street sign down or a sewer blockage, before our crews roll from the shop, they know what's in front of them, they know they have the equipment, they know they've got what they need to execute work in the field. So how do you do this? You go out there and you video this, in our particular case, and you geolocate everything into our GIS system, and then from that you collect all the attribute data, roll that up into a database, and that's how you start doing it. And then you start doing predictive analysis from that and planning out of that. That's the place that we're going. That is not the place that we are. We have not a single section of our infrastructure, data-wise, that looks like this right now. On paper maybe, but not like this.
Where are we as far as inventory? On what is where? Is it still on paper or is it on?
Mm-hmm. At this point in time, everything is on paper.
Microfiche.
Yeah, everything is on paper at this point in time.
So we haven't gotten to electronic yet.
Nope, that's what we're in the process of doing.
But we know where all of our manhole covers are.
No.
Because we did a count on them.
This is true, but there's been more since then.
But we know where they
It's not
are.
a location.
Yes, we know where they are, but we don't necessarily know what's in them. That's the other part of it.
Well, I didn't ask you that.
Here's counting covers.
That's right. We're not sure which ones the trolls live in or things like that out there. So, yeah. So that's our target, is to get to that position, and really attack that. That's really the exciting part about this particular phase of what we're doing, is that data collection side of it. It's hard, it's difficult, but it gets us into a completely new phase. So that's the exciting part of it. And I'm going to let Tiffany talk to the next 3 slides, since I wanted her to do something from sitting up here the whole time, right? So.
Thank you. So you have 3 slides in your packet this evening, and they're separated between collections and treatment, and then collections and then treatment. So one thing that we've been trying to do, and Keith kind of touched on, is over the last few years, we've been using the 2008 rate study, and we've been trying to separate out the costs related to sewer collection and treatment based on that rate study. And so that's the model that we've been using over the past 10 years or so. What we did is I went through and I kind of updated it to account for new taps that have come online in 2017 and 2008, namely Littleton Village and then over on County Line areas of that nature. So it did kind of change our future revenue. So as a tap is pulled through the city, that's additional annual revenue to the city as well for treatment and collection costs. So we have 2 things in the sewer fund that we're required to maintain. One is we do have debt. We have a loan with Colorado Water and Power Development Authority currently on the sewer plant. And as long as we are still paying on that debt, we are required to maintain a $3 million reserve related to that. Once that debt is paid off, then we'll be able to release that $3 million. So that's one requirement that we have to maintain. And then the other one is internally, we have reserves that we want to maintain for the sewer fund as well. So we've placed that at 17%, which is about 2 months of operations in the sewer plant. The one thing that I want to note on here is I do still have the biogas treatment in here. It was approved in 2018, so you'll see a line item for $4 million related to that project. In the out years, we've also accounted for revenues that are anticipated to come in related to that project. And Keith will, I'm sure, talk to that a little bit later. Yes.
Question, so how do all the other districts figure into these numbers?
So the districts are revenue. So when we bill customers outside of the city of Littleton at the lower rate than inside city, it's a revenue coming into our sewer fund. And then we use that to pay for the plant costs.
So Keith, then as far as the inventory that we don't know we have yet, even though it's there, so we don't know what the other districts have either?
No, actually, I can say that the connector districts are pretty far ahead of us on that. The industry standard is to basically camera your system about 1/5 to 1/4 of your system every single year. And almost all of our connector districts are on that cycle now.
Okay, so then the revenue is coming, these are the ones that are contracted through Littleton, not Inglewood, right?
Right,
Yeah, okay.
right, yeah. And those connector districts are paying for treatment. They're not paying for the collection portion. Their district covers their collection costs. So that's the difference between inside and outside.
Thank you.
So,
And we set the rate for that treatment cost, even when it's outside of our district.
We do, yes.
so even though that's a lower number, that's not necessarily the number that someone outside of the district is paying in total.
Right.
Because they're paying a collections bill for whichever district they're in. So that's not the number that they're paying. There's an add-on to that. So the difference between the 235 and our 258 theoretically is the cost of collections within our own system.
So again, the two things are the $3 million requirement related to the debt and then the 17% reserve. So what we do for the 5-year plan is we want to make sure that we maintain those two requirements. And so we've kind of gone through and I've smoothed out some estimated rates or proposed rates in the future. And I think what's important is that even over the next 5 years, including the biogas treatment, plus there's about $25 million of improvements in the plant or to the plant that are included in these rate studies as well. So including those costs, we're still able to maintain a 1 to 1.5% increase over the next 5 years for sewer. And that's based on our current estimates today. We're going into the 2019 budget, so I'll definitely be revising that as the proposed budget comes in for 2019 and any adjustments for future revenues and again the plant costs as well. But I think it's important to know that we have enough in our fund balance and our cash in this fund to be able to maintain those lower rates currently over the next few years.
And the debt coverage is stable too?
The debt coverage is stable, yes.
Any questions for Tiffany before we jump into the fun part? So earlier this week, last week at the supervisory committee, the way that treatment plant is operated is they have a director, and then there's a supervisory committee, which is actually the governance structure, and that's the 2 city managers and the 2 public works directors, is how that agreement's been in place for 39 years, I believe, at this point in time, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the governance structure. So last week, we got a snapshot of probably what the 2019 budget looks like for the plant. You know, there's a little bit of an increase there, and one of the questions that'll come up is, and this will be discussed in more detail, is much like we've kind of talked about our own infrastructure, there was a similar approach at the plant for a long time. So we have a big plant, but we also are doing 2 things. We are dealing with deferred maintenance, and then secondarily, we're also dealing with we just went through the process of re-permitting down there, and so with increasing standards over time, we actually have to deal with changes in treatment, technology advancements, and those kind of things as well. So that's part of the process down there. I mean, actually, one of the questions that comes up is we've got 50 million gallons of capacity. Right now, on an average day, we use some amount between 30 and 35 million gallons. Now, I'll hear people say, well, why do you have this extra capacity? Well, if you look at the regulatory requirement over the next decade, that extra capacity is actually going to allow us to meet those regulatory needs for probably 10 to 15% of what peer agencies that are capped out have. So, so that's part of the good part about that. It's going to actually allow us to be well ahead of the curve from a cost structure as we deal with new technology and new regulations coming forward. It's really interesting to think that this is a business where the evolution of technology currently is at a very rapid rate. In this particular business, I mean, most of the treatment we do with microbes today. It's not really filters. It's little forms of life that are eating up everything and putting things everywhere. And so that's really what's going on. So interestingly enough, there is a lot of technology advancement. If you want to be a wastewater nerd, there's plenty of things to nerd out about, for sure. So future cameras. So last year we talked to you about the camera project. So that is underway. It started a couple of weeks ago. As we expected, the cost of that's about $1.75 million. There's a portion of that that's being paid out of the stormwater fund as well, since we're tackling that. The firm that came through a competitive bid process is out of Kansas City, Ace Pipe, and it's going to take them anywhere from 5 to 6 months to complete the work. And they have 8 crews plus a project manager on site. 6 of those crews are exclusively doing line work, and 2 of those crews are exclusively doing manholes at this point in time. So at the end, we will know where all the manholes are and what's in them at this point in time. So, so as part of that, I'll show you a little dashboard here in a second, which I'll do.
Keith, is that just Inglewood or is that combined?
Say again?
Is that just Littleton or is that Littleton, Inglewood combined?
That's just us. That's just us. So, as part of this will be live here later this week, probably. Hold on, let me look at. All right, where are we going here? Okay, this isn't my normal computer, so here we go. So, as of today, this is the dashboard of where we are, and it shows you we are about 5% complete to date. And we can break this down. This is all the lines in the city, basically right now, that are in the district that we're going to be taking a look at, is all the lines in the city. What you can see in green there is work that's been completed already, which is this. That we have some that's cleaning's done, but then we have to stick the camera in it and look at it as well. Incomplete, this is obviously a very small segment, and then needs cleaning before we go in with the camera work. So this is where our crews are also supporting the operational crews from the contractor. So in the complete section, you can actually go in to any of the segments that are in here and look at a particular segment and see the data that we have on it. If it'll work here. And see what a segment is. It'll tell you it's 8-inch pipe, for example. And as you can see where the blue lit up, even with one run, you may have multiple segments. Generally, that's manhole to manhole is the segmentation. So as an outcome of this, not only do we have the data and the quality of what's in there, every single segment is now being coded. We're going to be able to rate every single segment individually, and then we're going to have the 8 terabytes of dirty movies, as we say, done with this thing. Yes. Well, I don't know. If you really can't sleep, you let us know. We'll let you look at pipe video for
No, we have the CAFR.
I can sleep exactly. Thank you. I'm glad something's more boring than that. So I appreciate that. So as you can see, we're working our way through the system. We've got a long way to go. It's going to take a while. The crews are out there doing their thing every day, and sort of that's where we're going. Part of the reason that I put this in here is because to go to this slide right here is that in the first 5%, and this is why we're doing it, we've already found 3 locations that we would determine as potential imminent failures. And we also have already gone through at least a dozen plus system blockages in order to get the cameras in there. So, that's and we're about 5% of the way through at this juncture. And the other part of it is, if you look at that map, we're not anywhere near the old part of the city yet. So, so there's some of the things that are to look ahead to.
But that's not the youngest part of our city either, because it looks
Right.
like, yeah, it's still pretty old.
Yeah, so those are the kind of things that we're seeing already as we're going through this project. So,
And
So, wait a minute.
Keith,
Yes.
imminent failure, does that, like, what are some things that can happen? The pipes crack?
pipes collapse, you could have leakages. I'll show, in some of the pictures I put in here, I'll show you some of those, so you can really identify those on film for
I'd
yourself.
rather see that than blockages.
Yeah, exactly, so.
So my question relates to that. So you see an imminent failure, you just say, oh, there's an imminent failure, or do you?
You know, some of them you just have to assess the situation. None of the ones that we've come across right now are like, holy crap, we better put no pun intended. We better put a backhoe out in the street and dig a hole right now and fix that pipe. You know, that's not. Yeah, we haven't done that yet. So none of them are to that point. But they're ones that if we don't, we would say imminent failure is something probably in the next 12 to 18 months in a piece of infrastructure like this. So that's where the target of our highest
So
priority.
what do you call the ones that get somebody out there tomorrow?
Yeah,
I
emergency.
thought that was imminent.
That would be an emergency.
Okay.
So, yeah, that would be an emergency fix. And, you know, we do those occasionally. I mean, we've certainly had some of those even in the time I've been here. So, those things happen. So just to kind of give you a little heads up where we're going, part of this also is the asset management platform itself, where all of this data goes and resides. That RFP will be on the street in the next couple of weeks. It's just been finalized in the last couple of weeks with some details. It's fairly lengthy and deep one, but we expect it to be really good. Out of those things, we'll be able to create, you know, 5, 10, 20-year models for infrastructure maintenance and capital planning. Typically, when you think about sewer planning, you're talking 75-year time horizons at the longest stretch of that. When you start thinking about pipe and what's in the ground, there's pipe in the ground now that's been here more than 75 years. And so that's the time horizon that you sometimes think of in these time frames. You know, how do we build a replacement plan? And as an outcome of this, what we've talked about at the staff level is that once we get that level of data, that's the platform we need to really talk about doing a full rate study, which we haven't done in a decade. Bring in an outside firm, work through all the components of that, and probably, if everything falls into place, we'd like to start that in 19 with probably, it's going to take 6 to 8 months to get through, so it wouldn't be delivered until probably early 2020, typically based on my experience in going through a project like that. A project like that, you have public engagement as well, you've got engagement with all your connector districts and everything like that as well, because they're customers of ours too. So those are some of the things that are on the horizon. So I'll give you some really exciting images now to let you know. So basically the one that's up in the, hold on, let me myself fix it here, right? So the one in the upper left-hand corner, that's an okay pipe, but some of the things that you're looking for in a pipe like this are, this is a crack structure through here in the pipe. This is a cement pipe, so you got a structural problem here. This one here, you have root intrusion. So this is where your service lateral comes in from a home or a business, and you have root intrusion. Colorado's dry, so anything that's putting roots in the ground is trying to find any source of water. So that's what you're seeing right here. As well, this is an example of a longitudinal crack. To put scale on this picture, that's probably 2.5 to 3 feet long. That crack is in the concrete right there. Here's another, root intrusion situation that you have. There's a variety of things that you can do with that. You can jet them. You can use chemical root treatments to do those kind of things as well.
What causes the longitudinal left?
Like these two cracks.
Yeah.
It's concrete. It gets exposed, to the earth moving over time. I mean, we have some pretty.
And so that's what those things are. So
yeah.
And so that, depending on how big the crack is, how serious the attention.
Yeah. I mean, like this one. The good part about this one is you can actually see the flows in this pipe. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason firms like to do it this time of year and into the fall is because your flows tend to be less versus your spring and winter flows. So, these things are caused by typical ground movement, depends on how old they are, there's a lot of reasons that a pipe could fail.
Garbage trucks going down the street.
Well, having managed a lot of garbage trucks in my career,
How many of our lines are most of our lines concrete, or do we?
I would suspect that they are, but that's part of,
Right.
there's going to be a chunk of them that are clay pipe. We're going to have some steel pipe in there, but I'm not sure how much. If you go to a place like Highlands Ranch, probably 90% of their system is plastic pipe.
Right.
And then even, some of the treatments that you would deal with, for example, this pipe you can see. So what you would do in a situation like, say, the previous, is you can actually treat that by basically going in and doing a pipe burst, where you're going to run a PVC liner through it, and then it'll cure on the inside of the pipe, and that's what you see in a situation like this here. It's a little hard to discern on the image, but the problem you have here is you have sag. You have pipe sag, so it's impeding your flow, and so eventually you'll have wear and tear on the joint that's there, and you could have leakage out of that. This is another example of a fine crack with root. This one is not where a tap comes in. That's just actually where roots came in through a crack that's already been created. It's really hard to see in this picture, but so if you think of your house, the pipe that goes from your house to the main in the street is called a lateral. And you have to have a lateral connection there. And so this is a spot where the lateral's connection has failed. And that's pretty common. And as a homeowner or a business owner, you are responsible for everything until it attaches into the pipe. Very much so, even if it's under the street. This one, you got sag. You got sag in this one, and that's a concrete pipe as well. These ones, Jerry, this one's just for you. This is the manhole camera going up and down. That one's just for you. In this particular one, you can actually see that this is a stacked brick manhole. Today that would be a concrete manhole, but this is a stacked brick manhole, so that's been there quite a while. Also, think about the labor to even build that thing in place. That's all hand labor right there. These are other root intrusions, and this is the one that is an imminent failure example. This is a crack that is completely circumference around, all the way around the diameter of the pipe. All the way around. So it's not, most of the time the pipe, doesn't move like this, but it's separated and you have, basically a crack there. And so this is one of those ones that would fall into the imminent failure category if things were to continue to deteriorate.
And so is that situation one, like you said, it separates, so that essentially the ground sinks potentially? Is that what happens?
Yeah, or, here in Colorado we just have moving soils. On the facility side, I've had buildings in other places where, frankly, you shim the door this way every 6 months, and 6 months later you're shimming it the other way because the building's moving that much. So it tends to be closer to the foothills versus further away. So, these are just some, you can see this is a steel manhole pipe, and then here's another example of root intrusion that would take place over time. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at out there in the pipe structure. That dashboard will be up, on the web here. We're starting to do more dashboards like that so people can see where we're going, where we've been, that kind of thing as well. We're doing that for other projects. So to give you a little biogas update before you head into that.
Oddly, though, I find that stuff fascinating, what you just went over. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It is.
It is interesting.
And I can tell you, if you'd like to go out and sit in the truck for a day, folks that do this in the field day in and day out are a unique breed. That's all I can tell you. Like certain parts of our industry attract some unique people, and this happens to be one of them. That's all I can say. So it is what it is, So.
We want to meet them.
Yeah, but if you do want to go out there and see with the little camera and do something like that, let me know. We'll be happy to get you out there.
Not as fascinating as I thought.
You were asking for volunteers from citizens, and so what was that about? About the access? I think you were asking for homeowners to be able to access some of these.
Sometimes, in a situation where, maybe there's a lateral issue or something like that, the firm may knock on the door and say, hey, it would be helpful if we got access. Because a lot of them, you have your sewer run in the lateral, and there may be usually there's a clean out, and sometimes that may be the easier way to get an image to go through a clean out or something. So that may be really what might happen in that case. And actually that's great for the homeowner because they get a video shot of their lateral and they don't have to go pay a plumber to do that for them. So
What's our average, how many pipes can they cover in a day? a
I'm,
mile or?
yeah, a little
So
bit.
we have 127 miles,
127 miles.
and we got 5 months.
Yeah, 5 months at 6 crews a day. So,
Right, yeah.
they're going as fast as they can, but,
Yeah.
it's, typically from what I'm seeing, you're probably looking at a quarter to a half mile a day.
Right.
Even 6 crews, because if you think about it, you see those images of like the Mars Land Rover, it kind of looks like that with a cable attached to it going through the pipe is what happens. It's cool. It's a cool little thing. So that's kind of, but if you want to see it, just let us know. We're more than happy to have you go out there in the field and check it out. So to give you a little snapshot before we go into biogas, as you recall, the biogas project is one in which we currently burn off basically 95% of the methane that's created during the treatment process. And we burn that off because CO2 is way less impactful to the air than methane is. So in this particular case, this is a map of what, down here in the lower corner is where you have the digesters where we're pulling the methane off, and the Excel pipe is over here. That's the Englewood Public Works Yard in the upper left-hand corner there.
Here is where?
So this is the plant. All of this is the plant actually, and so this is where the digesters are. So this is where the methane's coming off. So it's being piped through here and up to Excel's line right up there. This is Englewood's Public Works facility right here next to it. The only issue, we were talking about this, Mark and I, today, that last week the supervisory committee pretty much went through the process of approving all the contracts and the flow going forward. There was only one question. We're still in negotiations with Excel related to the insurance coverage of connecting into their pipe, and they came with an original number, but we've been able to work through that. I think that'll be resolved actually probably by the end of the week. So that's a good thing. So, basically this is a Gantt chart, but the bottom line is what's important. The contractor is going to get basically notice to proceed here in the next 30 days, and then substantial completion will be July 30th, and then testing in August of next year would be the goal, and then fully online and rocking and rolling September 1st with total approval.
Are we on schedule? I know that one of the things we really paid attention to when we were making this decision is speed to market, so to speak. So are we meeting those expectations of when we would be complete and?
Yeah, I think, when we really, if we went back 3 or 4 months, I think we thought that substantial completion would probably be, the plant staff can speak to this better than I can, but late 2019 was actually substantial completion originally. So this schedule that you see is accelerated since then. So the current construction budget's actually well underneath the $8 million. It's about 7.3 at this point in time. So this is, we've had these discussions about the RIN credits. What you see on the red line is the absolute lowest price that RINs have been in their entire time. The blue line is the current market as of today. And then just a week ago, the EPA issued a statement that they do not plan in any way to cut back the RIN program, and if anything, they're going to try and expand it. Is what the EPA issued last week. So
That 8 million, again, that's split between us with the 7.8.
yep, that is split between the two cities at this point in time. So that's kind of just a quick, but they'll run over this in more detail, but I wanted to give you kind of a heads up going in. So in summary, what we wanted to give you an update on is sort of the timeline we're on. Right now we're in data collection with our assets. We're creating the asset management platform. Our goal is to get that in place, then we'll be able to fully understand what our maintenance and our capital needs are, and then we'll be able to push forward into discussions about doing a full-blown rate study for the first time in a decade with us and all of our partners.
What I understand from the Highline Canal Conservancy is that Littleton is working with them for stormwater. How does that impact the budget? Does it?
Doesn't. So the question, what Councilor Fay is referring to is if basically Denver Water is going to not run water through the High Line within the next decade. They only have a few users still on the ditch, and so the Highline Conservancy plus all the jurisdictions in South Suburban, we've all been involved in what that's going to look like over time because it is a regional asset. But there are implications of not running water in the High Line, including You've got a lot of shade canopy as a result of that. You would not have all those trees if there wasn't a ditch there. So those kind of things, and so as part of that, historically ditch companies do not want to take stormwater for a variety of reasons. And they will sometimes negotiate that with you, but having done a number of those deals, you want to put in like this much stormwater and they want you to take over maintenance of like a mile or something like that, is kind of the way it works. And so what we've been doing with the other jurisdictions here in the area is we've been working with Denver Water to allow us to convey stormwater into the High Line potentially in the future, which would, it's not just going to sheet flow in there, it's going to go through water quality and all those kind of things. So we sort of have a consortium of the jurisdictions along this portion of the High Line, and we're all working together right now to talk about what that would look like, how a multi-jurisdictional operation would work, how maintenance would work, and those kind of things. So that's kind of what we're working on in that particular area. And it will be very helpful to us. I mean, we have a spot on Windermere, which this would be hugely helpful for us to run that stormwater into the canal. So.
Going back to the financials, we have the capital investments starting in 2020. So those are already known, what you're anticipating?
At the plant, yes.
The 4 million and then it jumps to 8 million is what I'm referring to, Tiffany.
Those are projects that are on the 5-year plan for the plant itself, that are going to be split 50-50 with Eaglewood and Littleton.
So this number is a 100% number, not our 50%, or is this the 50%
No,
number?
this is the 50%.
That's something that they'll touch on in more detail, definitely at the joint meeting, for sure. So
Is Sterling Ranch continuing with their own plant, or is there still conversations with maybe joining?
they're a little bit far out of our district. They would end up being an interceptor to us.
Okay.
We did take over the interceptor that we have as part of our conveyance system now. But they're going to continue to build out. We've had a lot of discussions recently. For example, you take like Centennial, which is basically Highlands Ranch. They already have a capacity issue. For example, they need to do plant upgrades, and they don't have a place to, they can't shift the flows for a while. So, we looked at whether technically it was possible to shift some of their flows into our system down there by county line. It's not technically feasible without a huge amount of investment on either party, but those are the kind of things we work with the partner districts to just kind of, we're all in the same business, we all have the same issues, and we all want great product and low rates, so we're trying to do those kind of things when we can. I'm more worried about all the cars coming from Sterling Ranch. And I am the wastewater treatment. So if there's any other questions, if not, we'll come back to you with more information. And as we get some of this, we'll probably shoot out some reports so you can see how the awesome movies are going. And we appreciate that. So thanks.
Thanks, Keith. Council, we're just going to go directly into the next one. This should not be too long. Did you hear that, Karina? May not be too rhyming.
Little
The
notation.
intention here, I just want to make sure that we understand that the intention of this discussion is specifically and exclusively around a moratorium. We are not going to discuss Airbnbs or code or any of that, and the city attorney will give a little bit of info on that in terms of where the staff is at it, but this is specifically a discussion on this moratorium.
Thank you, Mayor. Briefly, what you'll see in the council communication, it references a moratorium for 90 days. The question is, why 90 days? 90 days is the maximum amount of time under the city charter that the council can do an emergency ordinance. Also, an emergency ordinance will require 5 votes. If there's only 4 votes, you cannot pass an emergency ordinance. The charter requires 5 votes. This issue really came about because we have had some issues with what we call short-term rentals. One of the most common is Airbnbs, but there's a number of them. TripAdvisor does short-term rentals. Airbnb does vacation rentals by owners. There's a number of different online platforms. One of the difficulties we have is we have 2 sort of sets of regulations that address these. One is our zoning code, and our zoning code uses a series of very aged definitions for things like rooming houses and boarding houses that really don't fit today's uses. The other side of it is our business license provision. Now, there's some unique things about our business license provision that complicate how we address this. First, in most cities, you would get a business license for a 1 or 2 year period. In Littleton, we give you a business license that is essentially for eternity. Once you get it, it doesn't end until you go out of business. That poses some difficulties because we don't really have a structure for reviewing uses when the business license comes in for renewal. The other thing is that in most cities you pay an annual business license fee. And in Littleton, we don't charge a fee for business license. You just come in, you get it, you have it for an indefinite period and at no fee. So in terms of regulating these, some cities have looked at these and tried to regulate them through zoning. That's difficult for us with our definitions. So in looking at how we might approach this, we looked at the issue of doing a moratorium on the issuance of business licenses. Now you'll see in the document, we talk about the lodging classification. And the reason is short-term rentals fall within that classification for sales tax purposes. Interestingly enough, there's about 20 other things that fall in that classification too, including hotel rooms, including short-term rentals of apartments, and a variety of other things. So you just can't say, well, we're going to do a moratorium on lodging because you're going to be including all sorts of uses that you really don't intend. So the structure that we would recommend is, working with Jocelyn's staff, we are already looking at an approach on how we could regulate this. And we expect to be coming back to you in a study session, I believe it's July 31st, that we will be talking about the regulations for this. However, it's really important that we freeze the status quo for a short period of time. Because if we don't, a couple of concerns that we would have is, one, everyone may suddenly try to come in and change the status quo, and that creates problems under our current business license system. And two, if we don't, in essence, have a period of time where we freeze the status quo, then what could happen is that people may attempt to, because of the way the zoning code works, try to obtain some rights to the zoning code. Now, this isn't a unique Littleton issue. As you can see from the council communication, now we have cities in Colorado dealt with this. Cities all over the United States have had to do moratoriums for these very types of reasons. And we believe that, both Jocelyn and I, that if council directs us to, with a moratorium, that during this next 90 days we will be bringing something to you and we will be putting maximum effort to proceed with this so that we have an appropriate structure in place. Now, some people have argued, well, maybe does a moratorium somehow affect property rights? The answer is courts have generally, including the United States Supreme Court, have said moratoriums that are short-term don't affect property rights. They don't create a taking because they are short-term and as a result, there's not the property rights issue. You do a moratorium for 10 years, yes, I'd be very concerned about property rights. 90 days, no. One of the other questions is well, what about enforcement? We currently right now enforce code violations through a complaint-based system. Our desire is to get compliance. We work routinely with property owners all over the city trying to get to compliance with our codes. This moratorium would be the same thing. We will work with property owners. We will attempt to get compliance. Now, if we don't get compliance, yes, then they get referred to the municipal court and we deal with it in that fashion. But I would tell you, almost all cold cases, we are successful in getting compliance. And I would expect this would be very similar. And if you look at other cities that have done moratoriums, they generally find that they get compliance during the moratorium period. Now, the way that this would work is if council were to adopt the emergency ordinance on July 17th, it would go into effect immediately, and from that period for the next 90 days, we would not issue a business license for a short-term rental. The existing short-term rentals that have business licenses under our code, as long as they are in good standing, they would not be revoked. But we would not issue any new ones. In the meantime, we would be bringing to you a proposed set of regulations. We would work through those, and our goal would be to have those to first and second read to the council before the end of the moratorium. Now, that may mean that we will have to work with the planning commission to get through their schedule and work with you on your schedule. But Jocelyn and I, we have a great working relationship. We've already worked out a sort of a rough draft of what this might look like, and we're going back and forth with ideas. We've looked at the city of Golden. City of Golden has some very good things. They have a couple of things that were a little bit unusual. So the unusual we can deal with. The usual, I think, forms a very good format for the city of Littleton. And so I do believe that both the city attorney's office and the community development department, we will be ready to move forward with this. My recommendation would be that council provide direction on the issuance of an emergency moratorium by ordinance. Now, that only requires one reading because it's an emergency and it's subject to the 5-vote requirement, and it's limited to 90 days. If council wanted it to continue for some reason, we would be bringing it back for a first and second read in accordance with the charter. This, I believe, will allow us to freeze the status quo while we create the appropriate structure, and then we will be able to implement that appropriate structure. And as you can see from the council communications, that, as I said, this is an issue that exists across not just Colorado, but across the country. And the issues are similar. Many of the issues that citizens raised recently here with a short-term rental, you will find those same issues in other places. And so this is really designed to be a prospective way, freeze the status quo, address these issues, and then we can deal with that for the future. Now, I would tell you, do I expect maybe in a year or two that we would come back and have to tweak how we may address the issues? Certainly, if staff thinks that there's something that needs to be addressed, we'd be coming back to you and doing that. But with that, my recommendation would be that if council feels this is warranted, that you provide direction to bring back on the 17th a moratorium ordinance for the 90-day period. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the moratorium and what's required.
Are we still talking about 9 properties that currently have a business license?
I believe that's correct. There's 9 that currently have business licenses in the city of Littleton.
Carol? Does this include apartments?
Right now, this doesn't include apartments. It would include single-family attached and single-family detached housing. We can certainly broaden that to include apartments. When staff put the draft ordinance together, and there's a draft attached in your packet, but it's just a draft. The reason that we didn't include apartments is that because the rentals are already, we're not having from our multifamily neighborhoods the same types of complaints that we have had from single-family neighborhoods.
I have had some.
Okay.
And from Littleton Village, apartments there.
We can certainly address apartments now, and we can certainly include that if that's what council's direction is.
I have
a question about that. Do the people who are, do the management company and the people that own the apartments and lease them, do they allow people to rent out their apartments? I know my lease strictly prohibits it. It is a violation and you will be removed.
I would tell you, many of the leases do not allow any form of subleasing including this. Now, if the lease is silent, then you could. Now, occasionally, there will be actually apartment companies that don't have all of their complex rented, and they may use a few units as short-term rentals in their advertising.
And that's what's happening.
And that becomes a little bit different because from their standpoint, there's no sublease, there's no violation of the lease, they're just doing it directly. And that would be the area where this would kick in, would be to prohibit those landlords from doing that. And that certainly would be a choice if council wants to provide that direction.
So you would like that direction when we talk about this at that meeting, not now?
I would ask you to provide that direction now so that I can put that in the ordinance.
Okay, because what I would like is that you could only have Airbnbs where the owner lives in whatever it is. So, in the house, if they...
That's different than what we're
Yeah,
considering
that will be
now.
part of the regulations. We'll talk with you on July 31st.
That's later.
But that's what I was just asking. When did you want, I mean, if you're drafting it, then...
No, this is for the moratorium.
This is just for the moratorium. So the question that I think is being posed is should the moratorium also include prohibition, or application to short-term rentals of apartments during the 90-day moratorium period?
My thought is no. I think the issue has been with houses, and I'd like to kind of focus on that and deal with that problem.
But we also have the issue in apartments.
But that's my opinion, that where we're going to focus on.
Karina?
So, some of my comments are related to just making sure this is clear. So the moratorium, again, is subject to, the moratorium is only vacation rentals, which then we then define what vacation rental means. And it goes on to specify, in fact, that it's single family, so this whole discussion we were just having of should we add apartment or not. So it says it's single family attached or detached, as well as a manufactured or mobile home. So those are the types of essentially structures. And then it goes on to say the rental will be for periods less than 31 consecutive days. Clear. Why are we needing to necessarily specify how it's marketed? I don't know that that's necessary, and part of it is I don't want to limit ourselves. So I can put a sign in my front yard, I'm not going through a third party, and I can do a short-term rental, and it would not qualify under this, correct?
Well, yes, what the intent here was we wanted to just keep this narrowly focused around the online short-term rental platforms, which is why we could certainly take that out, but we wanted to provide that in the event we had a challenge or someone wanted to raise an issue, we could say a short-term rental where I put a sign in my front yard saying I'm going to rent my house for 30 days is a bit different than a short-term rental through. And certainly if council feels, well, no, it isn't, then we can certainly take that out.
I guess the only argument I can think of why it would be different is someone that's driving by maybe more of the area and of the neighborhood, but at the same time, it could be someone from out of town driving through. And I think the concern of vacation rentals has always been short-term, it turns over a lot, so it continuously changes the neighborhood. I just don't think it's necessary, and I don't know that we should limit it to third party. I think the real point here is, that particular house or building or et cetera, turning over often.
Councilmember, I certainly understand that, and I think it doesn't, I think we could take that out and the moratorium will work equally as well.
I think it's one less thing for us to try to necessarily regulate, find, or if someone's complaining, then you have to go ask the question, well, did you see that
Yeah, I'm not sure
advertised or
about
not?
taking it out. I would say leave it in, but not limited to.
But I don't,
Why even have it?
you don't need, you don't need it.
I-
If it's less than 30 days, however you got
As
that.
I was reading it earlier, just before I came in here twice, I liked it in there, but but again, I like to say that is clear, that's what we're talking about. And there's also other ways to or market these things too, but I would like to leave it in and just say, including the Airbnbs or whatever those other ones are.
There could be,
Private ones.
I think the risk there is there could be other ways, and we haven't
That's
captured
okay,
it.
it's not limited to, but I would like to leave it in there and say not limited to.
And right now, I mean, the term that just says is characterized by the following, so that doesn't necessarily mean it is mandatory that it has to be this way. It's really providing guidance as to how the types of things that would let us know it's a short-term rental versus not being a short-term rental. But that this is really a question for the council just to provide direction on it.
It seems like the number of days says that it's short-term, and that you don't need anything further to say it's short-term.
And that's the council's consensus.
Our call.
Council, my recommendation is to remove that language.
All three of those bullet points?
Number
4,
4,
5, and
hold on,
6.
let me read number 5, hold on.
It'd be number 4 on, under F.
Right now, I'm commenting, I'm moving, no, we're not voting. So my recommendation would be to remove number 4. And then, so do you want to go around before I go on to my next one?
Farrell, do you like that? Would you support that?
All of section number 4 under vacation rental, I need time to read the whole thing before.
So let me so I'll give everybody a little bit of time on that one, and I'll continue to ask my next question then.
I can't read and listen to you at the same time.
Wait.
I don't see
Is
where
there-
section.
Not section 4, bullet
No,
point
just
4,
bullet
up above
point
it.
4.
Rental shall be.
Oh, okay.
This one.
Yeah, you're saying section 4?
Sorry, I meant bullet point 4, the one I just.
Number 4 of.
Yes, absolutely, number
Number
4.
four,
Yeah, there's really not much there. I must have looked like an idiot that I needed time to read.
Slow reader, it's okay. Jerry, you're,
I'm okay with leaving it in.
okay.
Wait a minute,
Kyle?
so you're saying you're okay to keep it or remove it?
Jerry,
In, leave it.
Kyle,
I don't see the need for 4, 5, or 6 there because,
we're just talking about 4.
I know, but,
We're just talking about 4.
Yeah, I agree.
You're out.
yeah.
Pat?
Yeah, I'd say remove it.
It's out.
It's out then, yeah.
It's out.
Okay.
Wait a minute, so which are we taking out? 'Cause-
Four.
Okay, but you said 5
But
and
we're
6.
no, we're going one
She
at a
told me we
time.
can't do
We're
that.
going one at a
Okay,
time.
Okay.
You want to take 5 out?
I mean, I don't see the need for 5 there because,
Everybody okay out?
Yes.
Out. 5's out.
5's out.
6?
Out.
Out.
Yes.
6 is out.
Good job, Kyle.
Okay, anything else?
Yes. Okay, so this is where I was just again concerned about terminology. Section 5, so section 5.
Yes.
I'm saying it right correctly.
If you're really talking about
Yes,
what
I
you're
am
saying, I
talking
know
about
where you
section
are.
5.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
It says, "It shall be a violation of this ordinance to engage in the business of lodging services while subject to the provision of the moratorium." And so my concern here is when I look at lodging services, I'm looking at B and how B is defined. And again, the moratorium is on F. I'm getting tripped up because if we say lodging services, then it includes all of that. But I think in section 5 and 6, as far as I can quickly find, we're using the term lodging services, and I believe we should be using the word vacation rental.
Council member, our members of the council, I think number 6, if you look at it, at the last piece is except as provided in section 2 of this ordinance, which takes you back to the fact that moratorium is limited simply to vacation rentals, I would suggest that we go ahead and add that same language about except as provided in section 2 of this ordinance to section 5, so we connect those both sections to section 2.
Okay, let me read it and make sure I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But it's saying it would halt licensing for lodging services except for, so first of all, here it says section 3. It's very confusing to read, I think. So my comment is, we are already challenged by interpretation of some of this, and I just want to keep this as simple as possible so that it's very clear that the moratorium exists specifically for the vacation rental.
Mayor, Council, what I'd suggest is I'll go back and reword that, and we will make it very clear, because the business license is for lodging services, we can't really say it's a business license for short-term rentals, but we'll make sure it connects to section 2, so that that's the only thing it's applying to.
Is short-term rentals.
Short-term rentals, that's correct.
Of any place.
Of any place, it's just that
So
the
in number, in B here, lodging services, you list all the different places a person could provide accommodations. So the point isn't that the kind of place, but the length of time.
And the reason that definition is in there is that comes straight out of the tax code. So if we don't have that definition, then we get into a question of what is it that we mean under the tax code, because we're dealing with business licenses. So we need that definition as it is, but what I'll make sure is on 5 and 6, we connect to the fact that section 2 is only intended to have a moratorium on lodging services, business licenses for short-term rentals.
There you go. Yeah, okay. And so then that includes apartments. Does that include?
I need some consensus on that one.
You list in there single family.
Oh,
There is a place in there that states single family. Can you just add multifamily? Because there's also condos, townhomes.
I can easily add that. Right now, being a single family attached, which would include things like townhomes and condos, but they would not include apartments, because generally apartment has a separate definition. I would just simply add apartments if that's the council consensus.
Under lodging services, apartments are included there.
It is in terms of the general license, but for the moratorium, it's not. What I'm just looking for from council is, if that's the consensus, apartments will be in there.
Carol wants a, Kyle?
I was gonna say, can you just say residential, or do you have to be specific? I mean, I don't know if there's any,
It's really important.
loopholes in there that would.
No, it's really important to be specific here because of the broad definition of lodging services. I really recommend that the council be specific, but if you want apartments, I will incorporate apartments.
Carol wants apartments, Jerry doesn't, Kyle?
Where am I missing this? It says apartment in there.
That's just the definition.
Apartment, it's.
Oh, where are you?
Look at vacation
Unfortunately,
rental.
it's not a big concern. I haven't heard any complaints on it, and I know most of the stuff we're talking about is single family, so I'm gonna say no on the apartments too.
When you say, do you want to go with Jerry, or do you want to go with Carol, it's an automatic, we're going to go with Jerry.
Question that Councilman Faze raised, we should have.
When you position it.
No, she said you want apartments included, Jerry doesn't
No, well,
want.
she said Carol wants apartments, Jerry doesn't, which do you want?
No, I wouldn't know. I
I
was
want to go with Jerry, of course.
No, it was.
I prefer to go with
Where-
It would be a great position to go with Jerry, not with
No,
Carol.
that's not the way it was intended. I was stating
do we want the
where you
apartments
are,
or not?
and which way do you want to go in terms of yes apartments,
That's how
no
I understand.
apartments.
So these are definitions.
These are definitions.
All right. Karina, do you have?
No on apartments, if that becomes an issue. I'm sorry, see what? Say no on apartments,
Yep.
that I don't think we should include that in there. that's something the apartment
Yep.
complex
Yeah,
can
right.
address on their own, just like an HOA can. So I would say, I don't think we have to include it here. And again, we're trying to get this done in 90 days, focused on what we've heard, where
Before
the
now.
issue is.
So, Mayor, could you give me,
We have 4 no on
we have one,
apartment.
okay. The question that Councilmember Cord raised is that in the vacation rental definition, we don't reference that in apartments, and we only have these 3 reference. And the reason is, that definition, that one definition in F is the important definition, because that's the definition that's gonna be the basis for the moratorium. So the reason, the other definitions are just to define the terms, because right now, our zoning code and our sales tax code doesn't define these other things. Our zoning code doesn't define what a single-family detached home is. So if we don't have the reason these definitions are here is to just make sure that we have the necessary definitions for how we apply this moratorium. Normally, we wouldn't do that in this type of ordinance, but we have to have them here so that we close the loop. And I hope I'm making sense.
Yes, you are.
And that's why they're here.
Any additional questions? Do you have
Yeah, so in, sorry. So in section 3, so the single-family detached residential dwelling unit, and then after that, vacation rental, furnishing of rooms. If somebody rents just one room, they haven't violated, so should it be 1 or more rooms? That's in,
Well, if you look at vacation rental in F,
that's where I'm
yeah,
looking.
it says means the furnishing of rooms or accommodations to a person by the rental of all or part of any of the following. So, if you rent a room in a single-family detached home or a room in a single-family attached home, you will be subject to this moratorium during the 90-day period, because it uses the term, and that happens. I mean, a lot of the
No, I'm not following that, because if it says the means of furnishing rooms in, so now
Or
I'm dropping down.
accommodations.
Wait a minute. It's rooms or accommodations, so rooms is one thing, accommodations could be in addition to rooms, so, and I see no harm in saying room, or maybe room.
I had the same confusion. So I'm hearing you, Peggy, because I kind of stumbled on that one too.
Yeah, really.
Steve, does it change any of the important legal to make that change?
Mayor, I'm happy, I'll make the change.
Okay,
So
make it.
we-
Any other questions?
Well, can't you just put in parentheses with an S like that?
I want to clarify something.
Steve,
Is-
can't you put the S with parentheses? That was the question. Yeah.
Let's let the attorney do.
Yes.
Instead of, it's just room, but with parentheses S. I mean, what that does the same
Whatever, I
thing.
mean, he gets the idea, so however,
Yeah, we are not qualified to write law, he is.
It can say room or accommodations, those,
Right.
but I'm happy to make that change. And I think that, Mayor, I think there was a question from.
Yes, I understand. Karina?
So a clarification, is vacation rental a subset of lodging services?
Yes, lodging services covers like 20 different things, and it doesn't actually use the term vacation rental at all. It uses a whole series of other terms, which you can see in the
And
definition.
that's kind of why I'm asking, because, or otherwise, so is so we're very specific, but we don't have vacation in here, and so my confusion, I actually looked at lodging services as different than vacation rental.
And I understand it. The reason I took this definition is this is the definition that we have in the sales tax ordinance that the folks who issue the business licenses use. It has been determined by in hearings that this does apply to vacation rentals. I didn't want to change this definition because we're getting into a sales tax code change, which is a whole bigger thing. Now, trust me, I would tell you, when we come in with more sales tax amendments, we will be doing that.
So that's fine. So then maybe under vacation rental, because vacation rental is a new definition that we just, that this
Yes, this is a brand
So
new
maybe
thing.
under vacation rental, we say as a form of lodging service, so we can connect that.
I will connect that.
And then the follow-up then is, under lodging services, we have 30 days, but under vacation rentals, we have 31 days. So I think they need to be the same.
And I would take care of that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Steve. Peggy?
Yeah, so in section 4, number 5, and I don't know quite what intent I have in mind or what we're trying to restrict. The renter has exclusive use of the portion of the premises rented.
Gone.
5, excuse me.
Who's counting?
Those three, the council provided consensus to take out.
Oh,
The
so
only,
those are the 3 we're taking out? Oh,
Yeah,
already
yes,
removed?
yes, they're gone.
I
Not
didn't
there,
get-
you're seeing
I didn't
things.
get to scratch it out, sorry. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Mayor, council, is there any other questions?
No, run.
I will.
Can we run too?
Okay, we have one quick report from city manager that we want to share.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I hope council saw this afternoon, I sent you just a very brief email about a challenge that the city and South Suburban have been having about some kind of unofficial tubing event here, Saturday, July 14th. And unfortunately, the person hasn't responded well to a couple of cease and desist orders. And so the Facebook page, I think I gave you a screenshot, still shows that, the event has been canceled, but refuses to take the site down. So the staffs are quite honestly very concerned that some unofficial activity is going to still occur. And so we had a pretty lengthy meeting here with the two staffs, again, City and South Suburban, about what are we going to do about it. And we had some problems last year. This happened without us noticing this thing, and we had some private property owners kind of raise some objections. Business owners, excuse me. And so I think the only response we have, quite honestly, is to close the river for that particular day. And there is one family that has obtained a permit, so in the statement I sent out, just a clarification, a family did, make an application for a permit as we would expect, and we granted that. So that's the only, if you have a permit, then we will allow them to go down the river. But in this particular case, this event, we would not be granting them a permit. The problems that we foresee with a tubing event of this size would be considerable. So unless you've got any objections, that's my intent, is that we're going to issue an order to close the river that particular day. South Suburban staff would be closing the parking lot at C470. They would be staff at different locations along the river to make sure that tubers would not get in there unless, again, that one family with a permit. And we have basically our police on standby in case, something happens that's, a little unusual here, but short of that, we believe we have a management plan to kind of take care of this activity. I think it does raise an issue in the future that we need to come up with some standards about how we're going to monitor this and manage it a little more effectively. Part of it is the amount of water that needs to be in the river for a safe tubing event to begin with. I think there's a lot of concern that when the river is low and we allow a large amount of tubers in there, I think that the degradation to the river itself is an issue, and that is a serious issue. Not only in the river bottom itself, but in the riparian habitat along the sides that we have spent millions trying to enhance and protect. So I think we got some issues there that I think this unofficial event have kind of raised, and so I think we're just going to have to take this action.
And if I can just add, the river right now, it's at 20 CFS. And you run more water out of your faucet. It's 20 CFS. The highest it's been over the last number of months. I mean, this goes back to the end of June. I could go back further, but the highest it's been is about 50 CFS. So they're letting a little bit out for, I doubt that there's even calls. There may be just some minor calls downstream where they're letting a little out. But the Scott in our South Platte plan that we have approved alongside with South Suburban, we approved that rewrite of that management plan, updates of that management plan, recommends anything under 100 CFS is unhealthy for the river, for that type of river activity. So it is, and the other thing is, 4,000, who knows who's getting on the river. We do not have first responders to be able to handle anywhere near that. And what that does in terms of jeopardizing the rest of our community, the other thing I can just add is that that's not why we are creating the river that we're creating. We don't want to be Boulder Creek. We don't want to be Clear Creek. We don't want to be that river in Texas where everybody goes for that reason and that's the purpose. This is
It's a different river.
that's not intended to have those types of events. So this is serious stuff to close the river. This is serious to block parking lots, block trailheads, block entrances. It's unfortunate that some of our own community may be affected by some of this, but the bigger picture is I don't know that there's another answer at this point. This guy has been very, very difficult to work with.
How many showed up last year?
Over 4,000.
No.
That's incredible.
Yeah, no notification that it was an issue.
Would you clarify again, so a permit has been issued to,
A very specific family, about a dozen people.
and so what if a mob shows up at that place?
Then they will be directed away, and our police department is actually on standby if for some reason that gets out of hand. But, I would expect most people to comply with the order. In fact, we're going to make this public. We're going to post it. So we'll do our best to kind of communicate this here between now and the 14th.
And they will block the parking lot at the entrance, not let everybody come in. So it'll be blocked at the
Okay,
entrance.
so
they
people can't just go there
No.
and mob the place? Okay, that was my concern, so, thank you.
So do you normally need a permit to go tubing on the river?
No, not really. In fact, I think that's part of that we've recognized that we need to kind of look at our management plan and kind of tighten up. To the credit of this one particular family, they wanted to make sure they were doing whatever was necessary.
And was that just in this family, because it was a family of 12, maybe that's what prompted them
A
to?
little larger.
Got it.
A typical family, 3 or 4
Well,
people.
and some of it's dependent on the age of the people that want to come. There's the 20-year-olds. Well, they'll get 30 of their friends at no permit. But if a family is planning it then you also don't have the same problems.
Yeah, that was the first time I heard.
Yeah.
Was the permit issued before the event was notified that to cease and desist?
I don't know South Suburban issued the permit there. In fact, South Suburban, I think tomorrow evening is taking action here to make sure they have some regulations in place to do some enforcement here for this particular event as well. One last just note there. I did put an interesting article in the email here this afternoon where independently and a very timely article about this really is not the year to be floating down the South Platte just because of the kind of drought conditions and really the impact on the river.
Yeah. I don't want to get in there right now.
No, it's not.
Yeah, and I think the other thing
Algae
is,
growth and-
the special events ordinance that you passed came into play with this very early on because we were able to use that to say to this person, you have to get a permit. And that's when they then said, well, we're just going to have a group of friends just show up. But the action that you took gave us tools that we were able to deal with this very expeditiously up front.
You have one other just very brief update, if I may. Perhaps the council saw, one of our public announcements here, we got notification from CDOT that they're going to finish the paving on Santa Fe from basically C-470 north to Bowles. And we got notification of that yesterday. And so we were able this morning to kind of share that with a group of merchants here to get them at least informed about that. And yes, there are concerns about what's going to happen. And so for the next 30 days, CDOT is going to be paving at night largely, some work during the day. Again, all the way from C-470 northbound, just the northbound lanes. And if you remember what happened, couple of years ago, CDOT had a contract to do the entire section of Santa Fe from Bowles all the way to C-470. And then halfway into the project, they discovered that the state did not own the northbound lanes. The railroad did. And so for 2 years, they have been negotiating with the railroad on permission to gain access, and I'm serious, on those northbound lanes, and including maintenance. And so that's why the project got cut in half here, now why we're dealing with northbound only.
Just tell the railroad, you fix it.
So, it's just, you may hear some complaints, we're trying to do our best, based on the information that we got from CDOT to keep our business open.
It'd be nice to have more notice.
Mark, so how would they deal with the traffic that's not gonna be able to go on? I mean,
I don't know enough detail, it's a great question.
so probably some of it coming up through the neighborhoods, huh?
Yeah,
Well, they have to keep it going, so they'll be doing lanes, no, they won't shut down the whole thing.
Yeah, they won't.
No, they'll do a lot of it
Yeah,
at
but-
night. They did the other side, they did a lot of it at
Well,
night.
already stop and go.
It'll be more fun now. It'll be even more fun.
Totally unrelated, Mark is taking the next 30 days off.
Yeah, plan ahead.
Yeah.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.